Hello, my name is Liud, and I'm going to talk about the evolution of the English language. Now, have you ever wondered what time traveling would be like? Think for a second how awesome it would be. Where or better yet, where in time would you go? Who would you visit? And would you be able to communicate with the people that you are visiting? Although 500 years ago people spoke English, it was quite different than the English that you and I speak today. To top that, English about 1,400 years ago may have sounded like an entirely different language. English, just like many other languages, has evolved. Bottom line is, English has evolved from many groups of people, dialects and languages, and will continue to evolve. Now, let's first explore which peoples helped shape English to what it has become today. Second, what languages are like, dialects English evolved, and finally, how it will continue to evolve. Now, there are various groups of peoples who helped shape English into what it is today. As I've written over here on the board, I have the Anglo-Saxons, who were the first ones that spoke English, the Vikings, the second group of people that impacted English, and William the Conqueror, who came from Normandy, which is in the north of France. The first group, as I mentioned, were the Anglo-Saxons in England. Now, the Anglo-Saxons weren't simply just one group of people. Rather, they were the Angles, the Jutes, and the Saxons. Each group had similar enough dialects that they could understand each other, and eventually it became one language, the earliest form of English. And this English was much more closer to German than what the English that we speak today. The Vikings, the second group of people that impacted English, the Northmen from Denmark, they invaded England and they influenced the Anglo-Saxon with Norse. William the Conqueror and his Norman supporters came from Normandy, the north of France. They brought a dialect of French that also impacted the evolving English language. As many new groups of people came into contact with English, their dialects subsequently changed the entirety of the language from grammar to pronunciation. Now, English has evolved from numerous languages and dialects, and if you look over here to this chart right over here on the left, we have Germanic, which was the basis of English, the three different dialects from Germanic, the three different dialects from West Germanic, which is where English comes from, Anglo-Frisian, and finally English. So you can see the family that English comes from. So, stated earlier, Anglo-Saxon was the earliest form of English in which English developed from. On top of English being influenced by many, Anglo-Saxon was also comprised of various dialects from Germanic tribes, as shown above. As stated previously, dialects of Angles and Saxons were similar enough that they could understand each other. Consequently, it became one language, the English language. The next language to influence was the Norse language of Vikings. Now, although it was similar to Anglo-Saxons, they could probably speak to each other and understand each other. They had a little bit of grammatical differences, which began to shape the English that was being spoken. Now, Norman French was another language which came from William the Conqueror that impacted English. Although William the Conqueror, I'm going to call him Will, just affectionately, was a descendant of the Northmen, the Vikings, him and his supporters had been in Normandy, the north of France, for long enough that they eventually picked up a dialect of French. Now, while they were in rule, the language they commonly spoke was English, but it had French words, sort of similar to how we here in South Texas talk English, but a lot of words, we call it Tex-Mex, so we throw in Spanish in there. Now, another language that impacted English was Latin. Latin was spoken by the Roman Catholic Church and began to have an impact on English as church members from England spoke to those in Rome. Eventually, many Latin words were adopted into the changing English language. Lastly, from a modern perspective, many of the different regions that Britain would colonize loaned words to the English language, such as shampoo and bandana, those two words come from India, banana and tango come from Africa, and then one that we can personally relate to is piñata and tortilla are Spanish words. After identifying how English changed over the centuries, we should consider one major implication. English is a language that will continue to evolve as time progresses. First, it began as a dialect of the Anglo-Saxons and began to be influenced with many groups with different dialects. Consequently, these changed and molded English into the English that is widely spoken today. Not only did English evolve, it will keep on evolving as people are evolving as well. Now, the Linguistic Society of America argues that languages change as the needs of its speakers change. For example, text messaging evolved into texting, and text message evolved into just a message. Languages also evolved because of the ages, the region, cultural background, and educational level, are different, thus changing the language even more. Although traveling back in time sounds like a load of fun, and it doesn't seem like much fun when you are unable to speak with the people you encounter. Even though English was spoken 1,000 years ago, it wasn't quite like the English that we are familiar with today. Just as we have seen, English was impacted by many different peoples, the languages and dialects of said peoples, and will not stop evolving as time goes by. It should not come off as a surprise when people from the year 3000 think that the English that we speak today is completely different from the language that they will speak then. Thank you.